Good morning. Thanks for joining us today. It's good to see you. I hope you're having a good day. Come on with us to the Gospel of Luke today. I want to talk about self-centeredness and what it really looks like. We live in such a selfish world. It's been this way ever since the fall. So what does it really look like? When you look at the Gospel of Luke, you see this idea of self appear repeatedly. And I wanted to consider a few ideas with you this morning about what it really looks like. Luke chapter 12, verse 17. We're going to start there. It's the account of the foolish farmer. In Luke 12, verse 17, it says, this man, the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. Verse 17, it says, and he thought within himself, what shall I do? And he's going to tear down his barns and build bigger. He only consulted himself. And that's what a lot of folks do today. They don't consult anybody wiser than them. They certainly don't consult the Lord. And we know what the Lord said, you fool, this night your soul will be required of you, and then whose will those things be? The Lord goes on in verse 21, and he says, so is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. So you see the idea, again, of self and only laying up treasure for oneself and not thinking about anybody else. Selfishness. Another place, though, you see the idea, this idea we're talking about, is in chapter 18 at verse 11. It's the account of the Pharisee and the tax collector, as the Pharisee prays thus with himself. Remember that account? It's Luke 18. He prays thus with himself. Remember what his prayer was. I thank thee that I am not like other men. And he starts tooting his own horn, pardon the expression. But he starts bragging about all the things that he's done, and he thanks the Lord that he's not like other men, even like this tax collector. He prayed thus with himself. That is real easy to do, to not really pray to the Lord, but really to just pray to ourselves. And you might think about that. Another place you see the idea of self is in chapter 10. In chapter 10, in talking about the great commandment, remember that's the account where that scribe, that lawyer, says to Jesus, it says, and he wanting to justify himself says, who is my neighbor? And that's what we want to do a lot of times. We want to justify ourselves. God is the justifier. That is not our business, but that's what we try to do. We try to justify ourselves. Another place you see the idea of self is in Luke chapter 7. Luke 7, in the Pharisee's house, when that woman comes, and the man says, if this man, about Jesus, this man, if he were a prophet, he would know what manner of woman this was who's touching him, for she is a sinner. He doesn't say that out loud. He says it to himself, the passage says. And that's what we do a lot of times. We're filled with all kinds of wicked thoughts, but we put a good face on it. We need to remember that the Lord knows our hearts. We'll close out in Luke chapter 15, though, because there's a good place that mentions self. And it's Luke 15 at verse 17. And it's about the prodigal son, and it says, but when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare? And of course, that's the thing. Concerning himself, what did he do? He humbled himself. And that is the self that we need to be involved with. Hope you enjoyed this study. God bless you. Be a blessing to others. Hope to see you tomorrow morning.